Right, so one of the biggest problems any media face is that when they finally get to interview someone on behalf of the genocidal Israeli state these days, too often they get lumbered with an aggressive little man called David Mencer, who seems to get as much joy out of the nonsense he spews in defence of the indefensible as he does accusing various media outlets and presenters of having an agenda against Israel in how they choose to ask a question of him. But of all the outlets to accuse of having an anti-Israel, pro-Palestine agenda, to accuse the BBC of it, well, to say that's jumping the shark feels like a bit of an understatement. Nonetheless, Mishal Husain of Radio 4's Today programme and Jayne Secker over on Sky, who got similar treatment, though held her ground well, both had the thankless task of dealing with Mencer and both exposed him for the petulant, dishonest and frankly abusive individual he is, who Israel think makes for a good representative of their country to Western media. If they wonder why more and more people are turning against them, aside from the obvious scenes of genocide we've all witnessed and continue to see across social media, then the way he chooses to aggressively defend that doesn't help your case. And given he was being interviewed on two big mainstream media outlets, neither of whom are known for being ostensibly anti-Israel in their coverage at all, the fact he ended up coming off so badly is a direct reflection of himself. Mencer cooked himself in those interviews because he's nowhere near as big and clever as he thinks he is.
The Israeli human rights organisation B'Tselem said the other day that there are torture camps for Palestinians in the prison and in the military detention system in Israel. People can see the videos that Israeli soldiers have posted on social media where they're taking selfies next to and videos next to bound and blindfolded detainees, or they're filming blowing up Palestinian homes to commemorate the deaths of soldiers in a Hamas ambush. It's all these elements which are combining to paint a picture of the way that Israel is waging this war.
So is this your impression of impartial news coverage, Mishal? Because I think you just warrant the pro-Palestinian Reporter of the Year award, and I congratulate you for that. So these are the facts. We were attacked on October the 7th, not in a war that we wanted. We were invaded. They want to destroy our country. It's being controlled by Iran. We have a duty to our own people. We are mandated by Israel's people as a democracy to defend this country. That's precisely what we'll do. We will always get people out of harm's way. All of the global experts on urban warfare all say the same thing, that we've achieved the gold standard when it comes to targeting our war against the terrorists and keeping civilians out of harm's way.
What's the answer to the torture camps for Palestinians that B'Tselem have spoken of?
So there's no such thing. That simply doesn't exist. We do have an issue in that we have arrested many terrorists. We have arrested them, and we've had an influx of terrorist suspects into our prison, and we have had to make accommodations for them. We didn't expect to have tens of thousands of terrorists coming into our prison system.
Does accommodation
so we are
mean
adjusting to
them?
it. That is appalling. That's an appalling accusation. And without you producing reports on this war, and it is a war, one-sidedly, without context, what it does, it ends up with attacks on Jews on the streets of Britain.
Almost nothing, no information leaves Gaza without it being cleared by
It would help if international journalists were allowed in there by Israel, then we would be able to give independent verification, but you don't allow us in, so we can't. Can I just put one final
Jayne,
point to you? Whatever happened on Saturday.
That's what you call a drive-by. Allow me to respond to that when you make that accusation. This has been one of the most reported conflicts ever.
But not freely by the international media. The international media, Sky News, are only allowed in, accompanied by Israel on very, very limited trips.
It is a very dangerous war zone for the safety of these journalists, but we're keeping them out. But we will let them in.
That's a decision that you've just acknowledged. You are keeping them out.
No, the decision I'm taking, I'm telling you about, is that we're focusing on bringing our hostages home. That's what our emphasis is, because the story's getting out. I mean, you see them on your screens every single moment of every single day. So the story is getting out. So this idea that it isn't getting out is ridiculous. It's on our front screens all the time.
But it's hard because if I say a fact and then you say it's Hamas, we can't independently verify it because you won't let us in. So it becomes a circular argument, doesn't it?
Right, so those were clips from the Mishal Husain of Radio 4 interview, edited down by the brilliant Saul Staniforth on Twitter, along with a clip of Jayne Secker's interview with Mencer as well. It's not hard to see that the former Labour Friends of Israel director and former director at pro-Israel PR firm Weber Shandwick, where he was at the same time as now Labour MP and always Israel lobbyist Luke Akehurst, got absolutely battered, mainly as a result of putting his foot in it repeatedly with his own overly aggressive responses. I can only ponder on the delusions of adequacy this man must have of himself to think he's up to the job of being a spokesperson for a nation state, especially one in as bad a need for PR as Israel is right now. But the filth that came out of his mouth during those interviews, he'll be getting headhunted by Thames Water before much long if he carries on like that. Hussein asked him about torture camps for Palestinian detainees and the soldiers in the IDF who take selfies of themselves, the video footage they've taken which they upload to social media. We've seen the images, we've seen his videos. With the destruction they've committed and the prisoners they've taken, only she put it to Mencer that this is a picture being painted of how Israel is waging this war. And he called her a winner of the Pro-Palestine Reporter of the Year award, bringing into question her impartiality. Now this was just question one. She's got the Israeli spokesperson on to speak about allegations against Israel. He might want to sit there and attack Palestine and attack Gaza and attack Hamas. I'm sure he'd prefer it. I have no doubt of that. But in and of itself, given what we've all witnessed, it's a fair question. If Mencer wasn't so desperate to be as obnoxious as possible, he might have heard at the start of her question that the details she mentioned had been reported by B'Tselem, which is literally an Israeli human rights organisation itself. They are the Israeli Information Centre for Human Rights in the occupied territories. And they are raising these concerns, not least because Israel adopted new policies which mean they no longer share operational data on detention and imprisonment of Palestinians with B'Tselem, just that it is done on so-called security grounds, which often means people are held for years without charge. So when we talk of hostage releases, it should always be noted that Israel hold many more of them in reality than Hamas currently do in Gaza. So why does Israel never get asked about releasing their hostages? Your own state's human rights organisation put these questions to Israel, David Mencer, and when a journalist puts them to you herself, repeating them essentially, insulting her rather than answering her really isn't a very good look. Instead of that, you go back to the night of October 7th, pleading the victimhood, and as much as those events should not only be condemned, but equally independently verified, which Israel has not allowed to happen, and expecting Israel to mark its own homework honestly when it lies with impunity just isn't good enough. But it also ignores the subsequent 10 months of genocide which followed, which this image starkly exposes what Israel have done in laying waste to Gaza from end to end over the 10 months since, and still it continues. You, David Mencer, called this the gold standard of targeting terrorists and keeping civilians safe. 40,000 plus dead innocent Gazans, mainly women and children, say otherwise, and that image is a reality of your targeting. It isn't targeting at all, it is widespread, it is wholesale, it is end to end, it is done with impunity, and you sit there defending that whilst attacking those daring to ask you questions about it, defending the indefensible. And as for the mandate you have on behalf of Israel's people to defend itself, well, look out of your Tel Aviv window from time to time and see the protests demanding Netanyahu go. A great many Israeli people do not respect the mandate of a coalition government enabled by doing deals with hard-right fanatics. Though I realise such matters obviously do not bother you, you wouldn't have taken the job you've got otherwise. Hussein pushed him on the detention camps that B'Tselem reported, and he denied their existence. Perhaps you should do some homework. You really should. B'Tselem have just produced a report called Welcome to Hell. That's on the nose, isn't it? Welcome to Hell, the Israeli prison system as a network of torture camps. This short intro to that 118-page dossier reads, Welcome to Hell is a report on the abuse and inhuman treatment of Palestinians held in Israeli custody since 7th of October 2023. B'Tselem collected testimonies from 55 Palestinians held during that time and released, almost all with no charges. Their testimonies reveal the outcomes of the rushed transformation of more than a dozen Israeli prison facilities, military and civilian, into a network of camps dedicated to the abuse of inmates as a matter of policy. Facilities in which every inmate is deliberately subjected to harsh, relentless pain and suffering operate as de facto torture camps. 118 pages produced by an Israeli human rights group, a group of Israelis themselves, David Mencer. They don't exist, though, according to you. Well, maybe I need to cover that report myself more in depth, given a chance. But if you listen to Mencer, they're all terrorists, of course, just more lies, and we all know it. It all went wrong for Mencer. Husain is to be applauded for remaining calm throughout that interview. And I know I attack the mainstream media an awful lot, but her professionalism should be acknowledged. We know Mencer knew he'd flop, because come the end, he all but accused Husain of being anti-Semitic to my mind by only asking him about Israel. Well, he is only the Israeli spokesperson after all, and not letting him rabbit on about Hamas or whatever he actually wanted to talk about. It was therefore, in his view, a one-sided interview, which endangered Jews on the streets of Britain. Well, most British Jews are being white. It's really not the case when most British Jews are not obviously Jewish. Certainly not like we're seeing right now amongst Muslims on the streets of Britain, more often than not being non-white. And their religion, by and large, not mattering so much. Just the fact they are non-white is enough for some. That is as tin-eared a statement as anything you'd hear from the Labour Friends of Israel or the LAAS or the CST, who Mencer, incidentally, also briefly worked for. You don't get to pick the questions, Dave. Were Mishal Husain, if she had a barbed swipe in mind to throw at Mencer at any point, she was tempted. She didn't show it. Mencer teed Jayne Secker up perfectly for a response in her interview, though, didn't he? She seized the opportunity to put to Mencer the problem with Western media having to take Israel's word for matters when it came to reporting what is going on, because they won't let foreign media in. Well, it isn't safe for them, Mencer said. No bloody kidding. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, as of the 9th of August, 113 journalists have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. It certainly is dangerous there. They've mostly died by Israeli hands, though. Al Jazeera got banned from reporting in Israel because Israel didn't like the coverage of what they were telling about what was going on in Gaza. Their own newspaper, Haaretz, was threatened with being shut down at one point. Sure, it is dangerous to report from a war zone. But equally, their own coverage cannot and should not be trusted when, as an active participant, they cannot possibly be seen to not be biased. Mencer again stuck his own foot in it when he admitted Israel are keeping foreign journalists out. In all wars, in all of recent history, journalists have been there to report on what is happening because they know the risks and go anyway. So to stop independent journalism is to tell the world that you've got something to hide. Mencer blew it and deserves every bit of ridicule and condemnation he's invited that has come his way. Meanwhile, here's a video of one of those IDF soldiers very much talking about what they're going to do in Gaza when Israel wins the war, exactly as Mishal Husain was describing, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.